All right. Good evening and welcome to the Cresswell Water Rate Advisory Committee for Thursday, January 28th, 2021. It's just 5:34 p.m. getting started here, and we will go ahead and start with roll call. We will go in the order as it's presented on the agenda. So, but I'll start with Councillor Medina.
Councillor Medina here.
Councillor Hutchinson.
Councillor Hutchinson here.
Mr. Jackson, Robert.
Robert Jackson's here.
Okay. Mr. Carmichael, Steve.
Steve Carmichael's here.
Okay. And it looks like we have an excused absence for Carol Woodland. All right. So we'll go ahead and move on to item number 1 on the agenda, which is to elect a chair and secretary. So as the chair of the Transportation Committee, I get this one started off, but then we get to choose from the members of the board here. So this can be either one of the councilors or one of the members of the board. So do we have a nomination for a chair this evening?
Well, I would nominate you, Kevin. You have experience with it. You did it last year. Went very well.
Thank you. Put that out there for a second, I suppose.
I'll second that one.
Do we have any other nominate? Can we do other nominations as well, or is this? I'm not exactly sure what they. Or do we vote on this one first? You know, we have to do other nominations first.
I would just ask if there's other nominations, and if there aren't any, you would close the nominations.
Okay. So I will ask for other nominations in case there's anybody else that might be interested. If you want to volunteer yourself, I believe you can also do that. So anybody interested in getting that experience for the first time or whatever, you can do it that way too. All right. Hearing none, we'll go ahead and do the vote. Sounds like I may be the choice.
I believe you need a motion, and then you can vote on the motion.
Good. So let's do an official motion. Who wants to do that?
Well, I'll make a motion that Kevin become the chair of this Water Rate Advisory Committee.
Okay. I have a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second?
Councillor Medina, second motion.
Okay. Not sure who won that one. I think I heard Councillor Medina. I'll go ahead and take that. So Councillor Medina will be the second. So let's go ahead and put the vote. All in favor. We'll do a roll call version of that too. So start with Councillor Medina.
Councillor Medina, yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hutchinson.
Councillor Hutchinson's yes.
All right. Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Jackson's yes.
Okay. I wasn't quite sure. I didn't quite hear that.
That's a yes.
Okay,
Yes,
yes.
Kevin.
Okay, thank you. All right. And then Mr. Carmichael.
And I'll vote yes.
Okay, that's a unanimous. Looks like I'm it. So let's go ahead and pick a chair. Do we have a volunteer for that? Can we do that volunteer? Or does that need to be a formal process too?
I would use the same process.
Okay, thank you. So nominations from the floor for a chair or for a secretary. Take the notes for the meeting. I can't do both, so.
And I think it's best if one of the councilors does it. So I'll nominate Jerry.
So Jerry, you've just been nominated. So we'll go ahead. Do we have a second for that?
I'll second that.
Okay, I think I heard Mr. Jackson do our second on that one. So do you accept the nomination, I guess is the question?
I accept.
Yes. We will try to be as painless on you as we possibly can. So we go ahead and vote on that now. I think that we have to have an official motion, though, just like we did before. So let's go ahead and do the official motion, if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Carmichael.
Yes, I move that Jerry Hutchinson be elected to the role of secretary for this commission.
Okay, thank you. And do we have a second for that then?
Councilor Medina seconds.
That's the official second. Okay. So let's go ahead and put that to a vote. Start with Councilor Medina.
Councilor Medina votes yea.
Councilor Hutchinson.
I accept.
Okay. Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Jackson votes yes.
And Mr. Carmichael.
Carmichael is yes.
And I also vote yes. I forgot I didn't vote on that last one myself. I just realized that. Do we need to amend that, Michelle?
Do you want to vote yes on it?
I do.
Okay, we
I
can
just
add.
realized
we
that
can-
as I was running the meeting, that I forgot to vote myself. So I apologize for that.
Okay, I'll change it to 5-0.
Okay, thank you. All right. And we also have 5-0 on this one. So now we have a chair and a secretary. Congratulations to everybody. So we'll move on to the approval of the minutes from February 13th, 2020. Did everybody have a chance to look at those, or do we need a little time to read those?
They look good to me, and a number of people with us today were not there. So
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So make a motion that that the minutes be approved.
Okay.
I was about to say, yeah.
I'm sorry. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second it.
So second that. We'll go ahead and put that to a vote. Again, starting with Councilor Medina.
Councilor Medina votes yes. Sorry, you're breaking up there for a second.
Okay, yeah, I was getting a little bit of network latency there. I apologize for that. Councilor Hutchinson.
Councilor Hutchinson's a yes.
And Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Jackson's yes.
And Mr. Carmichael.
Carmichael is yes.
Right. And Chair Prachu also votes yes, and the motion is passed. The minutes are approved. We move on to item number 3, public input. Do we have anybody that has submitted any public input for this evening?
No. Excuse me, Councilor Prechu, no. There was no public input.
Okay. Having no public input, we will then move on to item number 4, which is to read section 47 of the city charter. Are you looking for volunteers on that one, Jim? Or is that my job as the chair?
That's your job as the chair, Councilor Prechu. You can assign that to somebody, or if you'd like to read it, that'd be great.
Well, I'm on a roll. I'll go ahead and do that. So everybody grab your popcorn. Crestwell City Charter, section 47. I'm going to go ahead and screen share this while I'm reading it, if that's all right with you guys.
That's perfect. I was about to say I don't have it right in front of me.
Okay. So that should be displaying for folks.
It is.
Okay, good. Section 47, water rates. A, notwithstanding any other provision in this charter, the city of Crestwell, beginning with the fiscal year following passage of this measure, shall determine water rates on an annual basis as part of the budget adoption process. Water rates shall be set so as to fully cover the actual costs of providing water services. B, for water rates effective following the passage of this measure, a water rate advisory committee shall be established by the mayor to review and recommend water rates for the upcoming fiscal year. The advisory committee shall be composed of 6 members, 3 of whom shall be councilors, 2 citizens of Crestwell, and 1 at-large position. The City Council shall hold a public hearing prior to the council's adoption of water rates. C, setting of water rates shall be performed by the City Council as provided in this section. There shall be no requirement to submit proposed water rates to city voters for approval. Should the council approve a water rate increase so as to fully cover the actual costs of providing water services, the amount of the water rate increase shall not be limited by financial measures such as the rate of inflation or the consumer price index. D, for purposes of this section, water rates and the rates charged by the city to users of the city's water utility system. I'm sorry, I think I may have read that one. For the purposes of this section, water rates are the rates charged by the city to users of the city's water utility system. Water rates include any per cubic foot charge, as well as any base or fixed charges assessed to water utility customers. E, we're almost there. For purposes of this section, the actual costs of providing water service, including all the costs associated with providing water services to Crestwell water utility customers. Costs include, but are not limited to, infrastructure costs, water permit costs, water supply costs, maintenance costs, personnel costs, and debt service costs. It's approved by the voters at the September 15th, 2015 election. All right.
Boy, that brings back memories. That was an interesting election.
I've heard about that one. I think that just rolled into town about that time. So that was all new to me. So I'm going to stop the screen share here. And now, having done that, we'll move on to item number 5, which is to review and discuss the water rates. I think this is where I hand it over to Mr. Piper.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Councilor Prechu. Thank you, Water Rate Advisory Committee members, for volunteering this time and coming to serve on this committee. I've said it in the past, so I'll say it again. It's good for us to do this every year. Practice in this profession is to do a 5-year rate forecast, and then that's what you stick to for the next 5 years. There's a lot of crystal ball work going there. I think you can get there with averages and it can be done, but doing it every year as part of the budget process is a tremendous help for me to plan each year, and then to look back and see how we did last year compared to what we were proposing. So again, thank you for your commitment to this. I'm going to share my screen. Here, let's All right, hopefully everybody can see that.
Got it.
All right. For those of you that have been on the Water Rate Committee before, you'll recognize some of these slides. A lot of it was information from the prior year that we roll forward every year. So we look back a couple of years and we try to forecast out in 4 to 5 years out and look at where we're heading, where water rates are going. I did send the slides out to everyone. I will mention that I put in some additional slides this afternoon. I listened to an economist talk on Friday, and I put some notes together to put in the slideshow to kind of answer that question of what's affordable, how's the economy going. So those are slides I can share with you after the presentation if you'd like them. So let's get into what makes up our water system. Not a whole lot of changes from the prior years. Majority of our users are residential users. It's 93% of the users. The usage is about 82% residential, and 3/4 inch meters, which the size of the meter restricts the flow of water, which kind of predicts how much water is going to be used, um, is at 96%. The methodology that we use is a potential demand base methodology for pricing water. It's based on the meter size, which I mentioned restricts the water use, and the base rate, as you saw in the charter, has to cover the fixed cost. So the charges for that infrastructure to be in the ground to distribute the water to the household, that has to be paid by the users of the system, regardless of how much water they use. And we do this potential demand-based methodology because it's a balance of the ability to pay and the cost to serve. Again, those who are using more water, who are going to be more demanding on the system, will pay more for their base rate based on the meter size. Here's a note: due to the low commercial and industrial use, the current rates are similar to the rates of a flat rate model. We've looked at this in the past, and because it's residential users use a predictable amount of water. The federal guidelines say about 5,000 gallons is the typical household user. That's watering the lawn, showers, doing wash, and we did a calculation of the average here at Cresswell, and of course we use cubic feet, which you have to do a little bit of math to get back to gallons, but it was right at 5,500 was the average for the year for a Cresswell resident. So it's pretty predictable. The base rate and the fixed cost. Here's a simplified, back of the envelope calculation to kind of give you some perspective of where we're at. So for the fiscal year 2021 that we're in right now, we have 2,094 meters. And if you calculate those at the base rate of $38.50 per month, 12 months, you come up with $67,428 in projected revenue for the year. The personal service costs and debt service costs for the water fund for the same time period is projected at $980, $962. So pretty close, about 13.5 off, but you can see the correlation between the base rate and what we're paying out for the fixed cost of the water. So that question about what can the ability to pay really drove me to think about the economic outlook where we're at right now. And I listened to the League of Oregon Cities had a speaker, John W. Mitchell, who was a former chief economist for U.S. Bank and an economics professor. And he's really studied what's going on right now with the COVID-19 restrictions and the economy. And this slide was really telling, and his statement on the fact that the current state of the economy was not caused by a financial collapse. The economic state is related to government edit. I'm sorry, that was a typo. Government edict, and that's the shutdown. And recovery will come back as restrictions are lifted, which were illustrated in this graph in his presentation. You see April, March was kind of when the restrictions hit, but April was really when things, people got laid off, and as we get into May, things are coming back. In June, we get into more looser levels of commerce, and then of course it tapers back down as we head in November, December. Interesting correlating with that is the gross domestic product. You can see kind of relates with that as well. In Q2, it goes down with job losses, and then pops right back up with not just the lifting restrictions, but as I'll show you later, the stimulus payments that helped. The employment drop and rebound, with February being 100%, it dropped dramatically, of course, and then it's rebounding. We're not quite all the way back to where we were, but it's looking better. Again, this was just an illustration of, you shut things down, you open them back up, people start going back to work. This was a great slide. This one really hit home for me. It just showed the power of the stimulus. So the PI column over here is personal income. This is everything. This is not just your job earnings, but as you'll see over here in this column, the transfer payments that came in. That's the stimulus payments. And then the earning percentages you see had a drastic hit in Q2 when COVID restrictions were put on. But yet, at the same time, personal income went up. So there was a huge shift. Of course, Q3, people go back to work, stimulus money's run out, so we see a shift back down in personal income of 10% for the third quarter of 2020. And in Oregon, you can see the same relationship here. This presenter, he broke it down to Oregon specific statistics. So the stimulus is really working. It's doing what it's supposed to do. And I just wanted to let everybody know. You may have heard this already, but from the coronavirus relief funds that the city of Creswell received, 28,000 went to help citizens with their utility bills through the community sharing group. They helped us through this time. People had to show that they were affected by COVID-19. They were impacted financially from COVID-19, and they were able to pay their water and sewer utility bills.
Quick question for you, Mr.
Sure.
Piper. So I believe, if I remember correctly, that that fund has run low now, or has
Right.
that? Okay.
Yeah, it has. Currently, the stimulus package that's up, that's being discussed right now, is slated to include more state and local funding. Hopefully, we'll get a round 2 of the coronavirus relief funds. They did extend the time period to spend this round. In the meantime, there was a hard deadline of the 30th. We did, though, spend through all the funds for water rate assistance, for utility assistance.
Okay, thank you. I think that's important to know.
Yeah. So how did the water fund do? That's one of the things we look at every year. We want to look back, and we can see that we look at the last budgeted year, which is the last audited year rather than the budget year that we're in, because those results are in, and we can see that we brought in $335,208 of revenues over expenditures. Now, when I say expenditures, that's our operating expenses. That doesn't include capital expenditures, future capital costs that we're putting in reserve. And so those monies that you see there, the $335,208, you'll see in a later slide, those are going into capital spending reserves for big ticket projects. We did really well. A lot of that was over cost controls, over materials and services, and we only had an annual rate increase of 2%, and it still got there. And even though we had an 11% decrease in water sales compared to the prior year, that was interesting. The coronavirus relief funds again helped the water users. That was about $20,000 in the revenue. And a little note here, in 2018-19, that was the first time the rates have been below 1% of median household income since fiscal year 2012-2013. Rates were pretty high compared to what people were making when I first came on here, and I think this committee's been a large part of making sure that they're within affordability and that we're keeping an eye on the rates. Here's a projection going out to 23-24 with a 2% rate increase. Medium income is a really moderate projection of 2% increase in medium income year over year. I don't think we're going to see 3% in the coming year, or maybe coming years, but 2% just to keep up with inflation. And then, I'm sorry. So this is what happens if we do a 3% annual increase over rate in rates with a 2% increase in medium income. We start to see that the red line here, the total rate is starting to exceed 1% of medium income in Crestwell. So according to the author Carl Brown, who's an expert in the field of rate setting, that's not really an affordable rate. And again, to go back to the why we have revenues over expenditures, the reserve for future costs. We have some large ticket items out there, like I mentioned, arsenic removal, infrastructure improvements. That's to make sure that we have enough water rights to serve our population as it grows. We have some Priority 1 distribution projects at 1.8 million, and Priority 1B distribution projects that are at $3 million. Those are all in the Water System Capital Master Plan that was adopted, I believe, in 2018. So it's a recent plan. Those are all Priority 1s, and then and then we get into the later priorities. But Priority 1s are considered near-term projects. Those are within like the next 5 years, as opposed to being a project that's out 10, 15, 20 years. We do have some big ticket items coming up that go further out, but I feel it's important to at least let the committee know what's out there in the next 5 years. And if you have any questions about any of the details, Cliff is on the meeting here. He can fill you in.
I think it would be cool to hear just briefly about what those projects are. Others might be interested.
Yeah, I can explain. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Cliff.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So as Jim alluded to, we had a water master plan completed in year 2018, and that's a 20-year outlook that looks at our complete system, including water rights from the river into the water plant, and then the complete distribution system, including reservoirs and fire storage. So it's a plan that has taken in all the considerations of the city of Crestwell and identifies what projects that are needed within that 20-year time frame. And then it breaks them into high priority, low priority, and kind of in the middle there. So what you're looking at here is the arsenic removal project. That's to augment our water production. We are tapped out on our water rights on the river. So if we were to grow substantially, we can't draw more water from the river because there are no more rights available on that. So during high production times in the summer, we are already hitting our maximum amount we can pull out of the river. So as we grow, we have 2 well fields. They're currently not being used. They have an arsenic component to them, and that needs to be removed before we can serve it to the public. So in the near future, the next 2 to 3 years, we need to look at getting an arsenic removal system installed so that we can continue to provide for growth. So that's what that one is. The Priority 1 distribution projects, that looks at old piping that basically needs replacement currently. So the main part of downtown, those water lines were put in 1962-ish, and a transmission line that transports water from our reservoirs down to the middle part of town. That's kind of the same time frame. And a lot of that project is that old piping and that transmission line. The Priority 1B projects are more of there to supplement the system or for growth. So they would be for low flow areas where upsizing needs, upsizing piping or better fire flows, or if there's growth out on the edge of town where we would need to install additional piping. So that's kind of how those projects are laid out. And those are just a portion of the projects that are in that water master plan. There's quite a few more in there, but they go beyond, you know, the 5 kind of year period that we're looking at right now for rate setting.
Right.
Thank you, Cliff.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So as you can, I'm sorry, Councilor Pechu, did you have something to add?
No, I just thanking Cliff for his explanation.
All right. All right, I guess I'll proceed. The list you see here is roughly, you know, a little over 5 million. Another note is Cliff talked about some of the projects will add additional capacity, and we do have system development charges that will pick up some of those charges. Only the pieces that add capacity. So if we upsize a pipe, the SDCs can pay for the additional size of that pipe. An example would be if we went from an 8-inch pipe to a 12-inch pipe, then that extra 4 inches would be paid for with system development charges. So we don't necessarily need the whole 5, you know, the 5.2, 5.3 million that's here, but we do need a substantial chunk of it to be in reserves and for these high priority projects. Here I've illustrated the financials. We have historical year of 1920. This is the year that we're in right now, the 2021 fiscal year, projected where we're heading there. And then projected out. These projections are based on averages. This is where personal services, they typically increase 5.9% year over year. If you go back historically, you can see that it's an average. Some years it's more, some years it's less. A lot of it depends on how medical benefits, you know, one year they can be a 2% increase, the next year they can go up 10%. The other thing that affects personal services, of course, are changes in PERS, and every 5 years we do a salary study to make sure that we're competitive with our local jurisdictions, so we don't lose our talented folks to other cities. So 5.9% increase year over year on personal services. Personal materials and services, these are supplies, maintenance type items. They typically go up about 3% a year. And then debt service, fortunately our debt service is fixed. That cost is not increasing. So what you end up having is about an average of 3% when you combine all three of those. Capital outlay, I'm sorry, that's just larger ticket items, but still these are operating capital outlay expenditures, not the things we're going to set up in a reserve fund for. Again, a 3%, but on average, the entire operating fund will go up 3%. You see this year we had a blip of 5% year over year here. I think what we saw was a big hit in materials and services in a single year. And then what could have happened there is there was some expenditures that were deferred. I know that we had a couple hard springs, one when we had a big snowstorm, and the next spring we had coronavirus. So there were some projects that were just, you know, we just didn't get to. So then of course they get hit the next year. So you'll see these years where it goes up 5%, and then you'll see year after that it's only 2%, and then, but on average you'll see a 3% increase year over year on the annual operating costs. And Cliff has already shared some information with me from some of the vendors. So a few of them are starting to show some price increases already. This next line under annual increase in operating expenses, the rate revenue increase, this is just a projection. So if we do a 2% rate increase and one thing I want to note again this year is the growth revenue. So this is the number of new homes, new users that are added. So we're not only getting increased revenue from our rates, but we're also getting more usage, more homes. So quick back of the envelope calculation on that, we have 2,000 users, we get 20 new homes. We've increased our user base by 1%. What that does is it alleviates some of the pressure off of rates to meet the rise in the operating costs. So the 2% year-over-year rate increase, what you've got down here is you get revenues over expenditures, but more importantly, you see the budgeted transfers going into those capital reserve funds. We start with the historical ending fund balance for the capital reserve fund. I show the projected transfer coming in, and that is the audited financial from, you would see it out here, it would have been the 18-19 financial revenue over expenditures. We budget as a transfer the next year, and you'll see it correlates right down the line. Whatever revenue over expenditures is, that's what's going into capital reserve funds. This year we had some expenditures for A Street, so we had to back those out of the capital reserve fund balance, and we're going to projected to hit about $1 million. And with the 2% rate increase and 1% growth year over year, we end up at 2.4 or 2.8 rather in the reserve funds for these roughly $5.3 million in projects. But as I said before, we have some SEC fees that will pay for part of that. If we do a 0% increase for 1 year, but then we go, okay, but we need to keep those reserve funds going at 2% every year. It's 2.7 million in reserves for those capital projects, and you can see that year over year that change in the rate increase. If we go 1 year without increasing rates, you end up $110,000 less in the savings. That may be okay, or what often happens with municipalities is then they all of a sudden need to raise a rate down the road exponentially to catch up. I thought I had a slide in here for a 3%. Yeah, well, there's a rate increase of 3% ends up with a $2.9 million capital reserve fund at the end of 25-26. So for water rate recommendations, we could do one of three things. You could recommend to the city council a 3% rate increase, and that would kind of buffer you from the risk of growth. Last year I will say we only had 10 new homes, so that was different than their typical year of 20 new homes. Hopefully, with the work that we're doing on the urban growth boundary, and that we're going to open up some new buildable land inventory. So I don't see this as a permanent thing. I think for Crestwell, the average is about 20 new homes a year in the time that I've been here since 2015. A 2% rate increase, as you saw earlier in the slides, keeps rates affordable, kind of stays in line with the increase in median income year over year. It still is enough to pay the operating costs of the fund, and it does get us some money in the reserves for capital projects. And then lastly, a 0 rate increase, that's kind of like, keep rates the same. But as you see, what happens there is that you get down the road and you either have to raise rates to meet those big projects, or you just don't have the money. You go out to get loans, but again, loans means more debt service, and again, you're back to raising rates to pay for that debt service. Any questions on water rates?
I guess the question for me, Jim, is we heard about the projects that will be coming up, but we didn't hear cost for those. So we see the reserves building, but I don't have any sense of whether the reserves are sufficient to fund those projected increases or improvements or not. I see the reserves building. I just don't know. Okay, so
right here, we kind of give you the high level. This is the totals on the CIP in the capital improvement plan.
okay, good. Glad you went back there. So it's a little over, well, 4.5 million. So can we go back to the slide to see the reserves? If we, it seems like 2% might be the way we'd go.
So 2.8,
That
2.7.
Yeah, none of those. That doesn't get us to the full funding for those. It's 2840 by 2526. I don't know. I guess it depends when those projects have to go in.
Right, and again, part of that will be paid by the system development charges that that developers pay in. So they pay a portion in to the water, the sewer, the streets. It says, okay, we're building new homes, and this is the additional demand we're going to put on your infrastructure. But only that additional demand gets paid for SDCs. So we can't use, we can't charge them for the current system, and we can't, and we can't pay for repair projects on the existing system with SDCs. Correct me if I'm wrong, Cliff.
2.8 doesn't get us there, but I guess another million does, but maybe that comes in system development.
Well, yeah, I think you'll see that's where SDCs will pick up the difference.
Yeah, so for an example, SDCs will only pay for a sizing increase. So it has to be over and above what your existing system is. So for an example, that transmission line that I talked about earlier, that's an 8-inch line. We would upsize that to a 12-inch to replace the old piping and give us additional flow. Well, since we're going from an 8 to a 12, SDCs would pay for 25% of that project. That's just right. That's an example of how SDCs would work.
Well, it seems to me like 2% might be a reasonable direction. You had a chart also, I didn't print out the whole document, but you had a chart of what that would mean in monthly increase.
Yeah, I could skip down to that if you want to see it real quick. So, you know, I put it after we talk about sewer. Oops, I think I lost it.
Oh,
I went off the.
Well, if you're going to get to it eventually, that's okay.
I'll try not to be too click happy here. I think that's what happened is all right, so here's the effects on the household bill coming up. So this is 3%, and then we have 2%. And I had to estimate public safety percentage increase. We don't know what that's going to be. That's, you know, that's the public safety committee's charge, but I wanted to show that because it is part of the total bill that we see at the end of the month, you know. So I'm thinking they're going to be in line with.
So just looking at the water though, which is one we're talking about now, it goes from 51.20 a month to 52.23.
Right.
About $1.
About $1.
$1 a month.
That's a 2 or 3% is what you said, right?
That's 2%. A 3%.
That's 2%. Yeah.
At 3%, it goes up $1.50.
$1.50. Okay. Yep. Okay.
Well, the 2% seem to align pretty well with affordability. the amount of incomes are going to go up, and $1 a month seemed, I don't know, seemed like a reasonable target to me.
Yeah, and you know
Yeah,
that
so far I concur,
if I might add here too that we used to have water included in the base rate, and it was also included in the charge of the base rate, and we've since split that out in prior years so that folks do have control over the water usage. So this is assuming they use a full 5,000 gallons.
So anybody think, do we want to arrive at a number on water before we hit?
I was curious about that. If you guys wanted to do, so the way that this typically goes is after we review them, we could potentially be making motions and voting on them tonight, or if we needed more information, we could have another meeting and come back and do it then. So it just depends on how folks are feeling. And we also have the sewer rates to look at after this, so we can do both of those at the end of the meeting, or I don't, however you want to do it, or we could do this one now.
Well, I guess
Anybody that votes would hold no.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch all that. What did you?
I'm sorry, you go ahead, Steve.
I guess we could do it either way. My sense is we've got a lot of information here. I don't know that more information will be needed. So, I mean, maybe we can do this in one meeting. And last time we came back for a second meeting because we needed more information. But boy, you've done a great job of laying out the information. It's just seems really clear.
Thank you, Steve.
I mean, it seems like someone would be comfortable and probably doing it towards the end of the meeting. We'll see if everything looks through there, and then I'd be comfortable with it.
Okay. Yeah, let's go ahead and move on to, unless anybody has any questions on water, we can move on then to sewer and review that presentation. And then...
Great.
All right, we good to go? The sewer rates now?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
All right, so sewer rates. So sewer doesn't have a separate meter for outflow, so we use the water inflow to estimate what's going out through the sewer line. That gets real interesting because in the summer, people are putting water outside on their yards. It's not going through the sewer pipe. So we're not collecting that. We're not having to treat that. It's going through the ground. For that reason, we do a wintertime usage. It's based on the actual meter rate because most people are just using water inside. And in the summertime, we do an average of their winter usage and then charge them based on those averages for the winter months. Or for the summer months, rather, I misspoke. So May through September, sewer is based on a winter usage. We also charge a per dwelling unit charge for multi-unit properties. So whereas we don't do that in water, and we rely a lot on those water usage, and that's why we have the tier system. The more water usage, the further away we get away from the base rate, recouping our costs, the higher that usage rate gets. But in sewer, we have this thing where we charge per dwelling unit for sewer. So, and how did the sewer fund do? It did really well. Sewer usage is pretty predictable because of that winter averaging. We had another year of good cost controls, and we had a really stable annual rate increase. We had 3% last year, which seemed to bring this revenues over expenditure number up over prior years. I remember the first year I came on with the city of Crestwell, and there was this year over year 0.5% increase that was going on for the water rates, and just to get caught up, there was this like 15% jump in a single year because the costs had way outweighed the revenues that were coming in. So where we are today is a great place. So again, reserves for future costs. We have a big ticket item here. The sewer plant has to be upgraded. We found this out when we did the wastewater system facilities plan. That one was adopted. It was adopted for the water. I think, was that in 2015, Cliff? Or 16?
I believe that was 2016.
Okay. Cliff, do you want to explain a little bit about what's going on, why we need to upgrade the sewer plant?
Yeah, so it's actually driven by DEQ and our regulations. So our treated effluent goes a couple different places, but where it's really regulated highly is where it goes to waters of the state. So it actually makes its way out to the Coast Fork of the Willamette. The Willamette is an oxygen deficient river, and it also has a loading rate that you have to hit to discharge to it. Our current plant was put in the first lagoon in 1959. It was upgraded in 1962 to 3 ponds. And then I forget the dates now, but the late 90s or early 2000s, it was expanded. But it's been in its current state for close to 20 years. It's a lagoon system that is biological type of treatment. There isn't a whole lot of treatment that you can do to make a better effluent. We're currently under an agreement with DEQ that allows us to discharge at a higher loading rate than our discharge waters are permitted for. And so DEQ has been calling in all those permits around the state. There's a handful of them that are in our position, where we cannot treat our effluent to a high enough rate to legally discharge to the river after a certain time. And DEQ is really lagging behind, especially because of COVID. But our projection is they're going to come back in the next year or so and say, you guys are not meeting permit, and you're going to have to bring your system up to current levels to be able to meet that loading demand that's in the river. So we've known about this for the last several years, probably close to 5. We've kind of been in the planning stages. Our wastewater plan has outlined it. We have a treatment system picked out. We're kind of waiting on DEQ to mandate that, because we know it's going to be about a $14 million project. So it's just kind of a looming project that is out there, but it's getting ever closer, and we need to have reserves to build that plant in the near future.
Thank you, Cliff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a big one when I came on with the city of Crestwell. This is something we were looking at, trying to figure out a way to pay for it. There's the IFA, Infrastructure Finance Authority through Business Oregon, DEQ and USDA that have financing options. We used to be grant options, but the feds are not giving out money anymore for water and wastewater treatment plants, but they give you the option to finance through them at low interest rates and pay them back, which means the utility user ends up paying for it over the years. So what we do have is a debt service reduction from those projects that Cliff alluded to. They were far enough out that at this point, some of those debt service, those loans are getting paid off. So we had a debt service reduction in fiscal year 2021, which means we start having more revenues over expenditures, but those are going into reserves to get us prepared for the next round of financing for this sewer plant upgrade. We also have 2 million in sewer SDC reserves because we are talking about upgrading a plant to handle more capacity. We can use those system development charges for additional capacity, and so we'll be able to use that $2 million. Again, historical year from 1920. Projected year from right now, the current year 2020, going into 2021, June of 2021, and then projected out through 25. You can see again 5.9% year-over-year personal services increase, a material service increase of 3% year-over-year. Again, with the capital outlay, this is operational capital. And then a debt service reserve that, as you see, reduced another 60,000, and we're looking at 104,840 year over year. I had that total debt, that total loan amount noted somewhere, and I maybe it's in some of the further notes as we get into this. No, I'm sorry, it's eluding me right now, but there's not a whole lot of debt service left. It's going to be paid off fairly soon. What's left of that loan might just get wrapped up into a new loan. And so we would pay that one off and start the new loan. Again, 2% increase. Here's our annual operating costs year over year. And then we've got our revenues coming in from the fund to get us revenues over expenditures. And then again, we start with what we have in savings, what we added from the prior year's revenue over expenditures is being transferred in this year. What we expended, again, this was A Street, big project. And then we keep money rolling into the capital reserves to get us to 2.15. Now that's not even close to the 14 million. But in this case, we're looking at getting rid of the debt service, which prior to this, 164,462 was again another decrease in debt service. It went down again to 104,840, and we'll continue that until we pay off the last loan on the water treatment. But before this, in prior years, debt service was, you're probably equal to what you're seeing in personal services. Same with as you saw with the water treatment plant. So, we want to get that debt service of we want to find a rate and the number of years we can pay it off that will still keep rates relatively the same without having to do a huge rate increase. And that that's been the strategy all along, is to reduce that debt service, go through IFA if possible, and get really low interest rates over 30 years if we can, and use some sewer SDC funds, and hopefully we're between the SDC reserves and a couple million in the water sewer fund, finance the rest of it over 30-year term and not raise the rates, except for the annual increase of operating costs. So to 3%, you see we get we'll end up with 2.2 million as opposed to 2.15 if we raise it 2%. And again, zero rate increase and 2% year over year. We get behind by about 100, a little less than 100,000. So again, sewer rate recommendations, you can increase the rates 3% just to kind of keep up with those operating costs and not think about any additional growth. We can increase rates at 2% just to keep rates affordable. And you can do a 0% increase, but that just keeps rates the same and the operating costs keep going up. So that puts us in the hole for savings. Again, the effect on the water bill, as Steve had mentioned, Mr. Carmichael mentioned earlier. All right, any questions there?
Jim, I have a question.
Okay. Sure, Michelle.
Are you going to talk about the project that we have out at the airport?
I was wondering about that.
Yeah, I didn't put that in here. So let's talk about that. I need to check on YouTube if that's all right, Councilor Pritchett. I think we may have frozen.
Uh-oh.
Okay, that's good. Oh no, it looks like it's still up and running.
Excellent.
Well, the timer's running, but the video is frozen. That has me concerned. So let me check it on my phone. Yeah, it doesn't look like we're moving. So would you mind if we pause for a second, restart it?
Yes. we can do
And
that.
we'll see what's going on here. It could be YouTube dropped off.
Yeah, we look pretty frozen.
Yeah, I may have to end stream and restart stream.